Back in the garage, back in the garage, in the garage, in the garage, back in the garage today, back in the garage, back in the garage today.
Back in the garage.
What's up guys, back in the garage today. While I'm waiting on my air filters to dry out for my Rottweiler air intake, I thought it might be a good time to go ahead and put the new chain guides on my bike. I'm going to show you what the original ones look like, and then I don't even know if I need one for the rear, but I just went ahead and got the whole kit. I'll show you what part numbers you need, and then we'll figure out how these damn things go on. Alright, so the general rule of thumb is we want to be able to see half of that rivet. That's in spec. I cannot see half of that rivet, so we're going to go ahead and replace it. So you know what I'm talking about there. It is the rubber plasticky chain guide that goes around the top and then also down around the bottom of your swing arm. There's also another part to the chain guide kit that goes back here. We're going to go ahead and replace it too, and just go ahead and replace everything all at the same time. The chain guides on there right now have almost 28,000 miles on them. The chain and sprockets itself, though, it only has about 9,600 on them, because I put them on right before I left on my trip. The original factory chain and sprockets were in really good condition when I took them off, but just as cheap insurance, I went ahead and put new ones on. In order to do this, you will need the chain sliding kit, I think that's what it's called, or chain sliding guide. There is the part number right there. Now, it doesn't come with new mounting hardware. I figured that stuff's going to be kind of gummed up, so I went ahead and got the new mounting hardware. These are the bushings we're going to need. They come in a set right there. You can see the part number. And then these are the screws themselves. This will install the front piece, and then here's the back piece I was talking about right here, and here is the factory part number for it. Now, from just eyeballing it, this rear one looks like it's like 99 times easier to replace than the front, so we're going to go ahead and start out with it. You can use a Torx bit, or you can just use an 8mm socket and loosen up these two screws. Now FYI, even though the front one you got to order the mounting hardware separate, the rear one comes with it. We'll zoom in there on them. You can tell the old one still looks like basically new, but the new one's pretty cheap, and I figured if I was going to replace one, I might as well replace two. Of course, putting them back on is just as easy. All we need to do is line up those two screws, see if we can get one started. There's probably a torque spec for this, but I'm just going to tighten it up a little. Alright, so the rear one was super easy. I'll probably just hold on to the original since it's in pretty good shape in case anyone ever needs a spare, one breaks or something like that. Now, unfortunately, the front one won't be as easy to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and loosen up the rear axle on this thing, and then push the bolt through just far enough that I can clear the chain adjusters, and that should give me enough room. I can get the chain off, and then we're going to come up here and probably pop this front sprocket cover off, and we're probably going to have to move the swing arm bolt through a little bit to give us enough clearance to get in there and take care of what we need to take care of. That said, before I do any of this, I think the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and clean up my chain. I did wash the bike earlier, but it hasn't been detailed or anything. I'd like to get a lot of the dirt and grime and stuff off the chain first, and maybe clean up the rear sprocket a little bit, and then get to work on the chain guide. I went ahead and pulled the chain guard off. You don't really need to. I just kind of wanted it out of my way. There are just these two screws, and there's a Torx head in the top of this here that also is part of the hardware to mount the new chain guide. Next thing I'm going to do before I loosen up the rear wheels, I'm going to go ahead and take the sprocket cover off. You've got a screw there. You also have another one down here. You can get to it without actually shifting. You got enough play there in your shifter that you can get an extension under there. So you can see I got the sprocket cover off. One thing I always recommend doing, every time you remove this thing, just take a paper towel and some parts cleaner. You'll get some dirt and grime in there and just clean it out. Next up, I'm going to take my 32mm socket and my breaker bar. This thing's probably going to move on me. We're just going to break this axle loose. You'll see why here in a minute. Alright, we got that nut off of there. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to grab a little mallet, we're going to tap this through. We're not going to take it all the way through, we're just going to take it through a little ways. The reason I don't want to take it all the way, I don't want to change anything. My chain's already properly adjusted, so what this will allow me to do is pull this off of here. So now, I also have one on the other side. That'll allow us to slide this forward and give us some slack in the chain. You can see what I'm talking about over here. This one is actually attached, so we just want to make sure it's through far enough so then we can slide this forward and it'll give us a few inches of slack. Now off camera, all I did was put the nut back on the other side and just tap it one more time with the mallet. You can see we're clear. You can see all the slack we have in the chain. Now we're going to pull the chain off of the rear sprocket, which should give us enough free play up here. We're about to find out in order to access this chain guide. All right, so we got the chain off the back, but I was afraid of this. So this is your chain slider, and I keep calling it chain guide. It's interchangeable. But there's also a chain guide up here, and we are going to have to remove it in order to get enough clearance to just pull the chain out a little bit further so we can get to work on what we need to work on. In order to do this, we're going to have to take the slave cylinder off here. So that's going to be 2 bolts. Now the big thing is keep this out of harm's way while you're working on everything else. And do not touch your clutch lever until you get this back on. So it's just those 2 8mm bolts. You can kind of see what I did with mine. I just kind of pulled it up here and kind of tucked it into the crash bar so it's out of the way. Now down here on the chain guide, I see we have this screw here. I'm surprised we don't have one. I know there's another one here on the back side. That might be the only 2 that we need in order to pop this thing off of here. We'll find out in a second. The screw I just removed there is an 8mm, but for some reason the one on the back side right here is a 10mm. Alright, so I have the 2 fasteners out. Oh, spacer. So there is a spacer that goes behind there too. So I have the 2 fasteners out. Now all we're going to do is pull this out of place. Probably ought to clean it up too while we've got it off the bike. Alright, so next up, this is a 27mm nut on the end of the swing arm bolt. We're going to pop it off. We're not going to take the swing arm bolt all the way out though. Now with that out, what I want to attempt to do is drive this through, but again, I don't want it all the way through. I just want it so it'll give me enough room to pivot this swing arm a little bit, which will hopefully give me enough clearance to get this chain guide on. What we've got to do, since we've already taken the 1 fastener out that was connected onto the chain guard, there is another fastener right back here that we need to take off, and I believe there's just 1 on the bottom side. And they're both Torx heads. Alright, so with the 2 fasteners removed, now we're going to try to get this chain slide off of here. Let's see how this goes. So my concern, and this is why I wanted a little bit of free play in the swing arm, is man, this thing is really in bad shape. I didn't want to take the front sprocket off, but I may have to. We'll find out here in a minute. Yeah, I don't really see a way of getting it off of there totally without taking the front sprocket off, so I guess we're gonna have to take off the front sprocket. So it was probably actually a good idea I got us a little bit of free play in the swing arm, because I know from experience to take this front sprocket off, having a little bit of free play because there's hardly any room to get those teeth to clear the swing arm. One thing we're going to have to do, this washer right here is bent up on this side, so you're going to have to straighten it out a little bit. It's a lock washer. Then we're going to pull this nut off of here, and then we should be able to pull the sprocket right off the bike. Alright, so we have the nut off the front sprocket. We also have this lock washer. Now this thing gets, you can kind of tell there, it gets bent up on the side. I've had to drive it back off, and that locks the nut in place further. There is a torque spec on here, and we'll talk about this when we go to put it back on. Now this next part, I'm probably not going to be able to show, but basically what I'm going to do is wiggle this off of here while pushing on the swing arm a little bit, which will give me just enough clearance to get this sprocket off. And there is the front sprocket off the bike. Now I can't stress enough, you're going to use your left hand to pull the sprocket off. You're going to push on the swing arm with your right hand. It'll give you enough clearance, the thing will pop right off of there. Now we should be able to get the chain guide off. Alright, we got the old chain guide off the bike. It might be kind of hard to tell on camera. There's a side-by-side comparison of the used one on my left and the new one on my right. You can tell the new one has a lot more depth to it, the piece running down the center there on the guide, than the one on the left. It's tough to get a good angle on it there, but this thing was definitely due for replacement. Now we're going to slide the new chain guide into place. If you're unsure of how it goes, the longer piece with the flat section and piece sticking out in the middle, that goes on the bottom. Also, if you want to look at it this way, this piece here goes to the inside. You also have 2 fasteners that go on top and only 1 fastener that goes on the bottom, so this is kind of hard to screw up. Man, you know it's a big day of filming when you go through 2 camera batteries. We're on the 3rd one now. You're just gonna have to take your time getting this thing back into place. Alright, now we've got it, we just need to attach the fasteners. Now, even though the original fasteners weren't in too bad a shape, we're going to go ahead and use the new ones, so make sure you get your little, basically, washer there and screw. One's going to go right here. I'm not going to put the one on back here yet because I haven't put the chain guard back on. And then you can see this sticking out down here. We've got one that goes down there as well. Now, maybe you remember what the original one looked like. Maybe we can do a side-by-side comparison, but see the rivet now? Because this thing is locked down into place. That's what it's supposed to look like, as opposed to the one I had on there where you couldn't see but maybe the top quarter of the rivet. Alright, so with the top and bottom fasteners in place, again I have one more to put on the back. Next thing I need to do is get this front sprocket put back on. Again, just a little push on the back of that swing arm and that thing should snap right back into place. Now we're going to put our lock washer on. Make sure you get those teeth lined up, and then we'll get the bolt put back on, or the nut put back on. This nut on the front sprocket needs to be torqued down to 73.8 pound-feet or 100 newton meters. And then once you've got it torqued down, you want to bend one of these sides back over. That's just extra insurance to make sure this thing doesn't spin and come off. So I'm just going to tap back over here where it was before, or as close to it as I can. Alright, so with the chain back over the front sprocket, the next thing we want to do is grab this chain guard or guide and go ahead and pop it back on. Remember, there's one fastener down here, and then on the back side of the frame it goes frame, spacer, guide, fastener. Alright, we got that chain guide back on. Here's a view of the actual bolt we put in there in case you forgot. And if we look back here, that one right there. And now we need to put our slave cylinder back in place. You got a fastener up here and you have another one down here. Don't over tighten it. I don't know what the spec is on it, just tighten it up nice and snug. Alright, with all that stuff hooked up, next thing I want to do is get my swing arm bolt back through, so let me show you how to do that. Just grab yourself a rubber mallet. It's not lined back up, so I need to go over to the other side and get it lined up and then tap it the rest of the way through. Alright, so with the swing arm bolt back through, we're going to spin this nut back on, get it started by hand. Then we're going to torque it down to 95.9 pound-feet or 130 newton meters. So we can finish up with everything up front here. We're just going to take the front sprocket guard, get it back on. It's just 2 screws, and then we'll move to the back to finish up this job. Alright, so we're just about done. I'm going to go ahead and throw the chain over the rear sprocket, and then we're going to start to get the axle bolt back in place so we can get the axle tightened back up and get this bad boy back together. Alright, so with the chain back on, now we just want to pull the rear wheel back so that this will slide back into place, and then we'll be able to slide the bolt all the way through. Alright, now once you make sure you get your chain properly adjusted, you've got your slider guides back on, we're going to spin this bad boy back on, and we're going to torque it down to, I believe it's 66 pound-feet. I'll put that up on the screen as well as the newton meters. The last thing I have left to do is put the chain guard back on top of the swing arm here, so let me get that done. And with that, the job is done. We've got the chain sliders installed, brand new, front and rear. Alright guys, so that's it. Actually, I hate to say that's it, because this job does take quite a bit of time. There's nothing inherently difficult about it. You do get to clean some things up along the way that probably do need some cleaning, some dirt and grime down around that front sprocket cover and some of the items down there. Just take your time, and you know, it's nothing out of the realm of anyone that can operate a wrench. It's not difficult. So Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider hitting that subscribe button, because if you like motorcycles, well, this is the place to be. If you have any additional questions about installing these chain sliders, let me know down in the comment section below. And as always, I'll talk to you again soon.